Part 1. The Basics of Behavior Change. Chapter 1. The Intervention Design Process. When we want to change behavior, we start with a potential insight, an observation about the distance between our current world and the counterfactual one in which we want to live. We then validate the insight and flesh it out into a behavioral statement, which we use to map the pressures that are creating the current state of the behavior, and thus are the levers we push to change it. After we've validated the pressures, we design interventions that modify them, select and do an ethical check of the ones we choose to pilot and validate, test and validate, and, if those work, make a scale decision with continuous monitoring to make sure the interventions continue to contribute to the behavior we want. Collectively, that is the intervention design process in the heart of this book. Doing the IDP over and over and over is what putting behavioral change at the center of our work really means. Story time! When I came to work at Microsoft in 2012 as its first official behavioral scientist, one of the products I worked on was Bing. At the time, there was a potential insight floating around. Kids don't search in school nearly as much as you'd think they would. After all, school is supposed to encourage curiosity, so shouldn't search engines be pretty much the default tool for scratching that itch? As with any potential insight, the first step was seeing if we were actually onto something, or just chasing ephemera. The reason we call an insight potential is that in science we start by assuming things aren't true until we can prove that they are, rather than the reverse. This healthy skepticism about assumptions is what drives rigor, and why we continually validate what we think we know. So I went in search of data. I collected the IP addresses and total student populations of a few school districts, pulled query logs, then computed a daily QPS, queries per student. I was very proud of that one until I discovered that engineers already used it for queries per second, and found that it was less than 1. That felt small. 1 query per student per day seemed unusual, given that these were tech-savvy young people with classwork to do. But data alone does not a good validation make. So I visited some classrooms to watch how kids were naturally engaging with search in the current environment. The observations jibed with the data, giving us what scientists call convergent validity, evidence that is greater than the sum of its parts, because disparate sources support the same conclusion. Getting data to agree with data is all well and good, but being able to observe qualitatively what also appears to be true quantitatively is better. In this case, that meant seeing that kids were certainly on computers a lot, but weren't searching much, hence the QPS, yep, still great, of less than 1. Having validated that there was an opportunity for change, I wrote a behavioral statement that described the endpoint we wanted to pursue. Roughly, when students have a curiosity question and they are in school and near a computer with internet connectivity, they'll use Bing to answer it, as measured by QPS. Together, with a team of people from across Bing and the wider Microsoft community, I started to map out the pressures that were encouraging or discouraging kids to search. All sorts of promoting pressures came up, everything from the social desirability of knowing, Gnosticism, tasty, to the requirements of homework. And they were matched by a similar variety of inhibiting pressures, including the speed, complexity, and non-intuitive presentation of results. And so we went back out into the classroom to validate the pressures that we had proposed. Or we were supposed to. Before we could, someone in marketing got very attached to the idea of curiosity as a promoting pressure, and was hell-bent on launching immediately into a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign all about the wonder of the world. If this sounds familiar, it should. Years later, Google spent a small fortune on a Super Bowl ad with this concept while trying to promote voice-assisted search. I had nothing to do with it. The overeager marketer went so far as to make mock-ups before I managed to pump the brakes and take a group of folks back out into classrooms to watch kids. We promptly validated that second graders do not have a problem with curiosity. Actually, most adults wish they had fewer questions. One student asked in rapid succession, why I didn't wear a lab coat if I was a scientist, whether I knew his uncle who worked at Microsoft, and whether he could have permission to go to the bathroom. In this case, promoting pressures didn't seem to be the problem, as there was plenty of raw curiosity to power search behavior. And a massive ad campaign to fuel what was already in ample supply was going to be a huge waste of budget. To be fair to the marketer, we have a natural bias towards promoting pressures. What validation showed us was that the world as is was being driven by the inhibiting pressures of teachers, not students. They were concerned about online safety, exposing kids to advertising, and privacy, plus trying to fit search into the curriculum in a way that allowed kids to exhaust their curiosity without sheer chaos. So we dug in to understand those pressures.